Hello, everyone. My name is Miyota. I am a product manager at Line. I am in charge of the backend system for public APIs and Line login. I'm sure many of you have already experienced Line login as a user or as a developer. Please take a look at this video that explains the world of Line login. For instance, many times, when you register for a service, users must enter their name, address, and other information in a form. Here, using Profile Plus, which is an SDK provided by Line, the data already stored in Line is easily passed to a web application. In this session, I will talk about 4 topics. The first 2 will be presented by me about the current status of Line login and new features. The second half will be handled by Hasebe, who will give more technical explanations. Simply put, Line login is a social login service, so to say, provided on top of an OAuth 2 protocol. There are general features and features for developers. Line was born in 2011, but Line login is fairly new. It was made available to general developers 2 years ago. After that, Line It supported Line login and auto login, and the timeline was made available on the web. At the beginning of this year, the Line login feature itself was upgraded to version 2. Here are the features provided via Line login. First, features for developers. There are just 2. First is authorization requests. And through this request, user access tokens are acquired. But using this, REST API is provided to use this token. The API provided to developers are the following. And I have listed 4 user resources. Using this API, you can acquire these resources at present. Some of you may have used these already, others may have not. You may be surprised that the list is so short. But there are actually more, to tell you the truth. For some partners, these APIs are provided. An API or REST API to acquire users' email or phone number. And using the Profile Plus SDK, more detailed profile information can be acquired. Social Graph allows you to see who I am friends with if I were a Line user. The U2U message API is used to link users and bots. This is user-to-user messaging API. So instead of users and bots, this connects users and users. There are also APIs for Line Pay and Line Points, some of our services. Some involve transactions, others involve user history or usage history and account balance. These are not made available to the public yet. As our CTO, Ibin, explained, we are considering making these available to the public in the future. Here are some features available to users. Obvious ones are logging in with one's email address. There's also the auto login feature, which supports login. To explain in more detail, a website opened in Line's web view or an external browser on the Line app. From a web app that has Line login implemented, when users want to log in, Some of you have noticed that you didn't have to enter your email and password. This is because the authorization information held in the client is exchanged in the backend so that login is completed without you entering one's login name and password. That is the summary of our line login features. We think what we are providing now is not enough, though. As you can see in this photo, we are constantly thinking about how we can improve user experience every day and how we can provide a better developer experience. I think you are all familiar with how this discussion works, but we use a whiteboard every week to create a priority list of what we should add, what we should improve, and so on. So, in addition to quickly developing these new features, we also need to develop a scalable architecture system that ensures stability. Next, I will talk about 3 new features that we have developed. Some of you may think, this is exactly what I wanted. That would make me very happy. So first is about the login session. For each browser performing line login, the login session is completed. As you see here, in the past, the login platform did not have the session data, which is why the email and password box was always displayed. For websites that Line manages ourselves, the sessions were not managed, so it wasn't very useful for us either. I remember my email and password, but I think many users don't necessarily remember which email they use to log into Line or their password. Going forward, the Line platform will manage the sessions. And for the same session, as long as the session is valid, the email and password will no longer have to be entered. For sessions that are still valid, here's an example. The image for your account is displayed. You simply click Login to log in. With this update, you are probably wondering which browsing session is valid right now. This will be provided a little later, but this is another feature we will launch soon. If you open a native page, I think you will see a device section. Currently, the Line desktop application list is displayed. Going forward, as you see here, in addition to that, for each device or for each browser, you will see which session is valid. As you can see, you have a logout button in order to close the session. This is how you use it. You simply use a new endpoint. In other words, the details will be provided in the second half of this session, but this is another new feature that we launch. The new Developer Center should provide documents related to this feature. Please have a look after this session. Additionally, through this new endpoint, there are new features. That is, support for OpenID Connect. The second half of the session will explain more about this feature, but the provision methods will increase. The display name and other public user resources will be acquired through Get Profile. But in addition to this, ID token will also include these user resources. On the other hand, for email and phone numbers and other high-level security resources will only be provided through ID token from now on. Additionally, birthday, gender, addresses, and other user resources that are only provided through the Profile Plus SDK may be included in the ID token going forward. Please stay tuned. So let's go over the features again. It is a protocol on OAuth 2. It uses an access token to provide a user profile, auto login feature, enables login session enabled, and support for OpenID Connect. This looks like a good list of features, but for developers, I think you are still missing the essence. So this is the third new feature that we are launching. I hope this makes you happy. It is allowing users to friend a bot. As a developer myself, when I create my own service, as you must do as well, I think you are implementing things, and being able to implement email address is probably very attractive for you because you want to send useful information to users via their email data. Many users who are from a younger generation are probably most prominent, where they prefer to chat rather than sending emails for communication aside from with their friends and family. I think the click rate of, let's say, emails sent from businesses is decreasing. Based on our research, for the same number of marketing messages that are sent out, the number of clicks of a link in an email and in a chat, when we compare these two, the number of links clicked in a chat is 4 times more than the number of clicks of links in emails. With this statistic, I would assume that you would want friends or users to become a friend of a bot so that you can send marketing information to users not by email but through a bot or in a chat room. As you see here, as I said, I am in charge of the login platform, and there is also the messaging platform. These are two major categories. If developers can use these seamlessly, this would be great, but we were lacking the feature to allow this. Because when a bot sends a message to a friend or to users who become a friend of a bot, you would need a login feature. Allowing these two platforms to coexist would probably be very attractive to developers and would generate great benefits for us at Line as well. So for this new endpoint, a new parameter will also be introduced. If you set this parameter within the authorization flow, bots can appear. And if users can choose whether or not to become a friend of this bot. If users block this bot, you can also unblock it. I'd like to show you a video to explain what I mean. The authorization request using the new endpoint, you add a parameter called bot underscore prompt. Since this browser session is valid, you don't have to log in again. Then you see lolcat. If user select it and authorize the app, this is added to their friend list. If users have blocked this account, unlike @friend, it would change to unblocked. As a side note, we also provide another parameter called aggressive. In the user authorization screen, a bot is not shown. Right after authorization is completed, the bot is displayed so that users can be encouraged to add the bot as a friend more aggressively, hence the name. So how do we use these? It can be set very easily from the new Developer Center. If you go to the login screen, you'll see a list of bot candidates. And thank you for opening the settings screen for those of you who have. I'm sorry, it's not showing yet because it is still going through a beta test. So you probably won't see it right away. But I'd like to take this opportunity to provide this to you in this hall as a priority. After this session, if you visit me on the 11th floor or at the after party, please find me or Hasebe so that we can help you set it. That is all for my session. I would like to give the floor to my colleague Hasebe. Thank you very much.
Let me take over the floor from Miyota-san. Hasebe, myself, will go through some technical mechanism of line login. First of all, why login is supporting the OpenID. Let me go through that explanation first. Developers, when they decide to introduce line login to their own site, there are two approaches available for them. One is the conventional support method of OAuth 2. And the other option is the newly supported OpenID Connect. I have a question for you. Have you already integrated with external service using OAuth 2? It seems like many people have already used OAuth 2. How about OpenID Connect for integration purpose? How many of you have done that? Compared to OAuth 2, less people it seems. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go back to the main theme. Why Line decided to support OpenID Connect? We wanted to expand the use of Line login more and more, and we had a strong motivation to provide the emails and phone numbers to users because many web services makes email registration mandatory. So when you log into Line, if we provide email information, that will be useful for you. And with EC sites, the phone number sometimes is mandatory to be registered. And if that's the case, if you can log into the Line and the phone number information can be provided, that also will be useful for you. And first of all, we focused on email, phone number provided by OAuth 2. That's what we originally thought. However, when it comes to email and phone numbers, these are sensitive information. And just simply once agreed by users, would it be the right thing for us to keep providing that sensitive information to the user? Would that be the best thing for our user? We questioned. Unless they say no, the third application keep accessing your email and phone number almost perpetually sounds wrong. So we thought maybe we should impose some kind of a limitation. The first idea we came up with was with regards to email and phone number API, maybe we can shorten the access token period. But then from an external people, even though access token period remains, why can't we call the API? And that, again, doesn't sound right. And the other option we thought of was that when we issue access token, we can offer a specific token so that by using that special token, you can call email or phone API. However, if we issue access token or a specific token, that means we need to use more storage. And from a developer's point of view, they need to go through more cumbersome process of managing the tokens. And so it's not really the right solution. So we struggled. We thought and thought. As I said, we could have issued a specific token, special token, but we rather want to choose a method that's more standardized widely. Because if it's widely standardized, then The developers can leverage their existing knowledge, meaning that they can have a lower cost in terms of implementation. We can make them happy. So we thought many options, and if we choose OpenID Connect, we thought that we can resolve some challenges we have. So what is OpenID Connect? OpenID Connect Core 1.0 spec is available, and at the very beginning of that, it says OAuth 2.0 protocol has a simple identity layer added, meaning that, as you can see, OAuth authentication plus OAuth 2 equal OpenID Connect. You often see that description. And OAuth 2 was spec just for the sake of authentication, but with OpenID Connect, you can standardize for the purpose of authentication as well. Authorization as well as authentication. So what do I mean by the standardization of authentication? With regards to OpenID Connect, you have ID token. And if you use OpenID Connect, at the time of you capturing access token, you can capture ID token as well. For example, this is curl request that you can fetch access token. It looks like this. It's called token endpoint, API line.me auth2 v2.1 token. You can use post method and send parameter. By doing so, JSON comes back as response, and inside there's access token. And if you use OpenID Connect, as you can see from this bracket, ID token is being added as well. By doing so, you can capture ID token. And what is ID token? It includes JSON Web Token includes the authentication information, and JSON Web Token, simply put, is assignable JSON inside URL safe token. Therefore, when you decode this ID token, you can get JSON. For example, it would look like this in JSON. So inside JSON, you see authentication information. There are some rare property names, but everything is standardized. For example, SUV, that means subject. So this is where you see line user ID is included. And at the bottom, you see name, picture, the basic information as well. And also, email, phone number, that's included inside ID token. In order to get nickname, sometimes you need to call a line profile API, but using ID token, by simply record it, you can get the information you need. So as a developers, you don't necessarily have to call out the unnecessary API, so it's more friendly to developers. So all these sensitive information, email and phone number, how can we provide it? We can use OpenID Connect so that we can use ID token, and that can resolve our challenges. And also with OpenID Connect, as I said before, not only the authorization, but also it also standardized the authorization flow as well. So it's a benefit. What I mean by that is that with OAuth 2, line login sequence is described here. It seems quite complicated, so you don't have to really look into too deeply. But at the top of the sequence diagram, you see the OAuth 2 integration. That's how you get the access token. And in order to log into line, you need to get user ID of line. In the past, in order to get user ID, you needed to call line profile API, meaning you needed to go through a line-specific flow. Well, this is the same for the ID integration of OO using OAuth 2 with other companies. So such profile API is not usually standardized, meaning that each company have different spec, meaning from a developer's point of view, you always have to support one by one, meaning it is quite a cumbersome process for developers. As you can clearly see from RFC 6794, OAuth 2 is for the sake of authorization. So it's not to blame OAuth 2. And this is the sequence flow using OpenID Connect. You don't have to see everything here, but you connect first, And in case of OAuth 2, authentication information, you need to call Line Profile API to get the information. But with regards to OpenID, there is ID token that you can use to get the data. So there is OpenID standardized ID token available for you, so different from OAuth 2. You don't have to use the line-specific speckle profile API. So all the flows being standardized with the OpenID approach. So once it's standardized, what's good about the standardization is that it's a simple implementation using a specific library. So someone who's not too savvy with IT integration, you can easily implement the ID. We want to offer a simple method for many developers, so we are focusing a lot on the standardization. That is why we decided to incorporate OpenID Connect. Let me talk about line login using OpenID Connect in more detail. Let me use sequence chart. Mostly, it's the same as OAuth 2. So if you already have an experience of integrating with OAuth 2, then it's not much of a confusion for you. End user, click a link saying log into Line on third-party application. Then on the third-party application side, you need to get a consent from the user. So access line.me, the Line Authorization Server, there should be a redirection to Line Authorization Server. And the parameter looks like this: access.line.me auth2 v2 1 authorize. The authorized endpoint, for that authorized endpoint, you need to specify get query as such. You can specify the privilege required for the scope. And if you use OpenID Connect to the scope parameter, you can specify OpenID. By doing so, Line's authorized server understands that it's using OpenID Connect for integration. And response type, it only supports authorization code flow, so you can just specify code. And for client ID, there is your own channel ID that you created at Developer Center. Redirect URI after the consent. Please enter your own URL. That's the redirected destination. This is the parameter required to support CSRF. So make sure that you set the value based upon the user session. And nonce, no once, OpenID Connect, a new parameter is called nonce. And this is used for replay attack, just like state. Please make sure that you set the value based upon the user session. So once you authorize request on Line server, you see the consent screen. It would look like this. If you have used Line Family Service, I'm sure you have seen this screen before. Once user agree, then the pre-specified based upon the redirect URI, you get redirected. And as a query parameter, you can use authorization code and state. And the state means this is where you can specify whether the state is correct or not. And once you receive the authorization code, you can get the access token. And because we're using OpenID Connect, you can get ID token as well. Just like this slide before, it looks like this. Access token, ID token, both are provided. Once you get the ID token, you can decode it so that you can get the authentication information. In most of the programming language, JSON Web Token libraries are available. So as long as you use them, you can easily decode the token. So this is how you get the authentication information. This concludes the Line login process. So this is the flow we go through by using OpenID Connect to ensure Line login. Compared to OAuth 2 approach, most of the approach are the same. So if you already use OAuth 2 for Line login, I'm sure the new approach will be quite simple for you. Please try out this new approach of OpenID Connect. let me wrap up the presentation. First, from Miyota-san, he talked about the current status of LINE login. Also, he went through a couple of new features as well. Second half, I talked about why LINE decided to incorporate OpenID Connect. And also, by using OpenID Connect, I explained the flow of LINE login process. This concludes the session. Thank you so much for your attention.